everybody, welcome back to Card Curiosity, where we try to find the best possible ways to make a good return on your investment in the sports card world. And today we have another episode of Rip It or Skip It, where we break down a particular set of cards and try to decide whether it's a good box to rip or whether it is something that you should skip because the potential return on your investment is so small. So let's jump in here to today's video. We are looking at 2023-24 Select NBA Basketball cards, and these have the big names like Anthony Edwards, Steph Curry, Victor Wembanyama, of course, and yeah, there's a lot of different varieties on what you can buy or what you have the options to buy. They have blaster boxes, hanger boxes, mega boxes like the one pictured here, hobby boxes, which are on the more expensive side. And so there's a lot of choices for you. And I guess before we jump in and try to decide if this is something that is worth investing in, let's run through our criteria very quickly to remind you what we look for. So the four things we check on are, first of all, the price of the product. Is it super expensive? Is it cheap and a good value? That's going to be a big factor. If you can get it for a good price, then that's only going to make the chance of a good return on your investment that much more likely. The second thing we look at is the checklist, and the checklist identifies how many players are in the product, whether they are good players or bad players. And so a checklist with hundreds of different players is not very desirable versus a checklist of 50 players and they're all very, very good. And so we're looking at the checklist of players here to see if it's something that we like. The third thing we look at is the gradability and the potential gem scores that we could get from companies like PSA or SGC when it comes to grading. The more likely you are to get a PSA 10, the more likely you are to get a good return on your investment if you can pull the right cards. And then finally, the fourth thing we look at is the staying power or the desirability of a card, and whether or not it's a card that is it only hyped up for a few months after it releases, or is this a card that people are going to want to own for many, many years if you have the right player? So that's what we're looking at today. First, let's take a peek at the price here of these select boxes. So if you run to Dave & Adams and type in Select Basketball, you'll see that some of these things are sold out. Some are they're going to look a little bit different, but they have the Hobby Box first off the line edition at $1,300, which is that's pretty steep. You can see the blaster boxes are at $45. I prefer blaster boxes around the $30 mark, but $45 is what these are going for. They have these H2 boxes, which are not guaranteed to have autographs. They're kind of like mini little hobby boxes. Those are at $380, which is pretty steep, in my opinion. If we go down to, let's see, these are some breaks here. We have just the regular hobby box where you get 3 autographs. Those are just north of $600. The problem here is that Victor Wembanyama, the guy that everybody wants, he does not have autographs. So $600 for a product where you don't even have a chance to get a Victor Wembanyama autograph is pretty rough, in my opinion. And right here we have the mega boxes down here for $70. That, to me, that could be a decent deal. But let's look over at blowout cards as well. Same thing. You'll see their blaster boxes are $5 cheaper at $40. Their mega boxes are $5 cheaper. Their hobby boxes are about $15 cheaper. But you're still talking for a hobby box around $600 or close to it per box, which is pretty steep. So for me, the price out of 5, with a high score being a great price, we're going to give this a 2, mostly because you have options to get something like a mega box for less than $100. If they didn't have these, then I'd give it a 1 or even a 0. $600 for a hobby box is just way too much, in my opinion. So that's it for the price. Let's take a look at the checklist here. And the checklist, we go to Beckett usually to take a look at the checklist and see what the possibilities are. So you'll see what some of these cards are going to look like here. Different products are going to have kind of these, they call them the disco circles here on them, depending whether you get the hobby box or retail boxes, mega boxes, things like that. You have the potential for autographs, but as you'll see looking at the autograph list, there's not I don't know, not super exciting names when it comes to autographs as far as rookies go. You can get dual autographs as well, different kinds of inserts, like these, what do they call those? The color wheel and Fuego. So a lot of different things here that you can get, but most importantly, we need to see which players are available. So it's going to tell us that we have 400 cards available here, and that usually means 400 players, but if you actually break it down and take a peek, they separate this into kind of 4 levels. The concourse level, you have 100 players here, and if you look at the names of these players, most of these players you're going to recognize. They're all pretty prominent in the NBA, and you have a chance to hit some big players like Luka and Curry and SGA, Giannis, like you. All the big names are here, which is cool. And so that's the 100 players here. Next they have the Premier level, which kind of same thing. In the Premier level, you can get all these low numbered cards as well. You can still get one of ones of these big players, and so you're going to have, again, I believe the same players as above, the same 100 are going to show up down here as well. You got the courtside version, which is same thing. You have a chance of getting one of ones when it comes to courtside, and same 100 players. So it appears that the checklist is, even though there's 400 cards, there's actually 100 players that you can find. So that's not too bad. 100 is pretty good, and in the NBA, there's quite a few players that demand a premium, like LeBron and Steph Curry and Luka and some of the rookies, Wemby today especially as well. If we look over at the autographs, this is where it's kind of disappointing that just not having the chance of pulling a Wemby auto can be that can kind of ruin part of this, but you still have a chance of getting low numbered Wembys, which is good. And so they have autographs here. They're decent. Let's say you've got a chance to pull some decent names, even a Dennis Rodman, and for some older ones, and you got some Zion, Tyrese Maxey, big players like that. So the auto checklist is a little underwhelming, but not too bad. So we'll give the checklist here a 3 out of 5. If Wemby had autos in here, I think I would bump it up to a 4. If there were only 75 players on the checklist instead of 100, I would probably give that another point as well. And so 100 players isn't too bad. I was kind of pleasantly surprised going through this checklist. So let's go with a 3 out of 5 on the checklist and move on to the gradability. How do these cards grade? Well, so far it hasn't been released for a very long time yet, but you can see we've still got, on the base cards, you have 554 of these graded, and they're grading at almost an 80% clip, which is great. Some of these inserts here are grading at 76 and 88, 88, 78, 82. So like the gradability here of this set so far is fantastic. So we're going to give this a 5, and let's dig a little bit deeper. You'll see like every single card that's being graded pretty much is Victor Wembanyama, which is funny. There's one Brandon Miller cracked ice here, but if you look on the right side here, you'll see almost all of these are 80, 90% or higher. For whatever reason, the orange flash cards here for Wemby are only grading at 56. So you'll have to take a close look at them before you send them in. But overall, this gem rate is great. We're going to give this a 5 out of 5 for sure. If we look at last year's gem rate was lower. I don't know why. Maybe the cards weren't quite as high quality last year. 58%, 59%. Still not horrible. That'd get a 3 out of 5 on our score if we looked at last year's. But yeah, for this year, we're going to give it a 5 out of 5. Now, last thing we're going to look at is the staying power or the desirability of a card. Is this a card that you can sit on for a long time, and is it going to go up if you hold the right player? And let's look at, I thought we'd look at 2 players right now that are in the playoffs. You got Anthony Edwards, who of course had a great start to the playoffs. They're kind of fizzling here against the Mavs, which can happen, but when that happens, you're going to see card prices come down. But if we look at basically, I'm going to look at 3 cards. We have the Select for Anthony Edwards of his rookie card, just kind of the base courtside here, and then a Concourse Silver here. And so if we're looking at the last 12 months, basically, and Ant-Man's Concourse Silver is up 305%. His courtside is up 63%. So you got to make sure if you're going to own a Select card, you want it to be the right one. And so Sometimes the cheap base cards like this aren't going to go up quite as much, even though Ant-Man has been popping off, and 63% isn't horrible. You know, if you had put the money in this Select Concourse Silver, it would have went up 300% instead of 63%, which is interesting. But really, like the GOAT card that everyone talks about is the Prism Silver, and so you'll see the Prism Silver for Ant-Man in the last 12 months is up 69%, which is way less than this Concourse Silver, but that's mostly because I think we saw a bigger rise and then a bigger fall. But it is interesting that the silver hasn't done quite as well. If we go out like the last 90 days, see how that might change things. You can see now last 90 days PSA, or the Prism Silver is up 51, and the Concourse Silver is up 148. So like this suggests that maybe the Concourse cards, the right Select cards, can be good ones to hold for the long term. If we look at Luka, let's do that real quick. Similar stuff here, you'll see. But what's surprising here is Luka's Prism Silver is up at 2,000, which is a ton compared to Anthony Edwards, which is just shy of 1,000. So Luka's cards here for the Prism Silver is way higher, and it's also up way more over the last 365 days. So it's up 60%. Not compared to Ant-Man, but compared to his other ones. For whatever reason, Luka's Prism Silvers have gone up more than the Select, whereas for Ant-Man, the Select went up more than the Prism Silver. But if we look at the last 90 days as well, you'll see Luka's Select cards are flat or down for the last 90 days, while his Prism Silver is up 95%. So like this to me tells me that the Select cards are they're not as good and they're not as desirable as the Prism Silver, which is to be expected, I think. But really what that suggests is that if you're going to own a card long term of a particular player, the Prism Silver is probably the best place to start, because when a player does start to play well, those are the cards that'll probably go up a little bit more and a little bit quicker. So we'll give the staying power, sorry it's a long-winded answer, but the staying power here is not bad. We're going to give it a 3 out of 5, which gives us a total score of 13 out of 20, which is not bad. It's pretty close to the 15 which we require for a Rip It, and you know, just for the fact that you can pull Wemby's here, I wouldn't blame you for trying to Select cards. I think for me, because of the price, again, I'm going to focus on these mega boxes if I were to buy, because you can get them for $65. That's not horrible. We get 8 packs, 4 cards per pack. You have a chance at autographs and other things like that. I'm not going to be spending $600 on a hobby box. No way at all. And so for me, we're right on the edge of being able to approve this and say this is a product that you should rip. It's decent. You have a chance at hitting big Wemby's, and it's pretty fun too. You can get some big name players right in the playoffs, so I wouldn't blame you. But again, hope you enjoy this. Let us know what you think. If you're pulling this or ripping this, any big hits, we'd love to hear about them. So hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, stay curious.